Okay, this particular assignment involved writing out the words ho ho ho, Merry Christmas using a while loop. I thought I would take a moment to go ahead and discuss this on a video so that we could address some issues that are a little bit easier to address using some video as opposed to writing all this text through emails. So here we go. Let's go ahead and get started. In one case, the person went ahead and defined a variable called ho, okay, and or an x, stored the string ho in there, and using a while loop, hopefully they printed it out. Well, if those of you who know a little bit about the assignment, who did the assignment successfully, are probably looking at this going, huh? Not sure what's going on here. Well, let's look at exactly what's going on here. While x, which holds the word or the string ho in it, is equal to x, okay, we end up with kind of an infinite while loop going on here, okay? So another nice little thing here is to put white space around these things. Makes it a little easier to read them, okay? But in any event, while x is the same as x, or equal to x, if you will, in a comparison, then we go ahead and do the stuff that's inside the loop. Well, let's see what exactly it's doing. It's going to print out ho, and ultimately automatically it'll print a space after that. Then it's going to print ho and a space, then ho and a space, and then Merry Christmas and a space. So in effect the output is correct. However, we never really used the while loop because all of the phrase, the entire ho 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 Merry Christmas, was printed right here. Well, what about the while loop? Well, currently it's running. Fortunately, what happened was he had the sense to put the word break here because he wanted to break out of this while loop. So the loop only went through one time. It started here, printed the message, and then it broke out of the loop. This doesn't take advantage of the while loop at all, okay? Here we have a situation where the person went ahead and set up a loop control variable, a counter, okay, to begin with. And again, we are taking the variable ho, and we are storing a string in it. So we have quote ho, comma, space, close quote. And then he's created a variable called ACC, which means accumulator, okay? So it looks like his goal is to accumulate or build this string, but he did something really, really interesting here. He went ahead and did str, open parenthesis, a null string, that is a string that has nothing in it, close parenthesis, which could have been done just by typing in this. That's it. There was no point in casting this here contents to a string because it already was a string to begin with by virtue of using the quotes, okay? So now we have while the count is less than or equal to 2, which that's good, because the count is 0, whereas if he would have set the count equal to 1, then we would have said while the count is less than or equal to 3, okay? Down here we accumulate our string, that is we build our string, and he used a very good convention right here, and that is he used plus equals. He could have gone accumulator is equal to accumulator plus this and moved on, but he also at least was consistent. He's using string here, he's using string here. Again, it's not necessary. All you have to do is just use the variable ho, like that. That's all that really needed to be done, okay? So let's go ahead and put it back the way it was. He increments the counter in preparation for going back into the while loop, because remember it's an indent, so it's going to go ahead and keep looping through this while loop until finally count, the loop control variable, is greater than or equal to the number 2. Once that has happened, okay, then we end up down here to print out the message. Now you notice if count is equal to 3, we'll go ahead and print out the message. This if condition isn't necessary. There is never going to be a situation to where you will be less than 3 on this while loop, or even greater than 3, because the logic is going to run its course without any kind of a crash of any kind, okay? Now the notion of thinking ahead about variable checks is actually a really good idea. It doesn't really apply in this situation. And then he goes ahead and he prints the output. Here we have a circumstance where the source code was taken from the web, okay, and the person admitted that they didn't really understand exactly what this did. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you what it did, but this is way beyond the scope of this class, okay? We took and created a little function, and we called that function. We took advantage of the function, okay? And the function basically said for item in items, which basically means if I hand this a list of items, I will take this list, I will peel off the first item in the list, I will store it inside this variable, and then I will go ahead and I will print it, okay? For item in items, go ahead and print things out, and this made it so that it prints it one right after another. The end function on the print right here makes it so that it doesn't do a carriage return. All right, so we did item after item, and then down here is where we did the call. Way beyond the scope of the class. I have to ask the question, why not use the same while looping structure? Why not use the same approach that was used with the flowchart? For example, here's what the flowchart looks like. Okay, we'll go ahead and bring this in here. We see begin. We set the loop control variable. We go ahead and we take the string and set it to null. And then while the loop control variable is less than or equal to 3, if it's true, concatenate the string with a ho, update the loop control variable, go back through here, make another ho, go back through here, make another one, and so on and so forth until you're down or done. And then we concatenate Merry Christmas to the end of that, and then we output it. This here is good programming etiquette, if you will. It is a good approach to programming. That is, we set up, if you will, the input. We didn't really have input, so I set these two variables to handle our input, if you will. We then did our processing through here, and at the close of our processing we had our final result, which was ready for output, and then we outputted the results. Okay, and we'll look at that code in a second in a little more detail. So let's look at the next one. This one did nothing. Okay, again, the credit, there was a copy from the World Wide Web. There was nothing done in terms of looping structure, no while loop that was there. If you're going to look to the World Wide Web, in this case, if the goal was using the while loop, why not just type in Google Python while loops and see what you end up with? Okay, so this didn't get a very good score at all. Over here we have one where this person did something rather clever. Okay, he went bellowing laugh is equal to null. So it looks like this is going to be the accumulator. Very poor job on commenting here. Okay, guffaw is equal to ho. Okay, and then we have a proper bellow laugh should equal ho ho ho. All right, and then he said, while the bellow laugh, which is this string up here, is not equal to the proper bellow laugh, let's go ahead and do this work. And the work was bellow laugh is going to be equal to bellow laugh plus guffaw. So he concatenated the string with the ho, and this kept going until the bellow laugh and the proper bellow laugh were equal to one another. This is a clever way of running through a loop without actually creating a counter. Okay, down here he then printed the output. Now, one of the drawbacks to this whole process is what happens if we want to do more than 3 ho's? 4? Sure, that's fine. 5? Sure, that's fine. But what about 100? The proper bellow laugh would then have to be initialized with 100 of these things, and as a consequence, the while loop would be a little ridiculous to try to write. But for this particular solution, this was actually rather clever. Okay, he did get a perfect score on this. Here we have a situation where the person just simply said count is equal to 0, so that's the loop control variable. And they just simply gave the output. So we're not using really good program design here because we're doing our processing and our output at exactly the same time. But given the fact that this was such a small project, I can see why this approach was taken. And of course the person got 100% on it. All right, so he printed ho. He included this in to make sure that we didn't do a line feed, and then he came down here and he incremented the counter, and then he printed ho, and ultimately he ended up with ho 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 Merry Christmas. Okay, and then he put a little note down here so that we would know why that end equals is there. This was excellent, okay? And he also showed where he found that information. By the way, stackoverflow.com, very, very great resource for finding out information. Here we have HoHoHo, input, enter the first letter. Okay, this is a disaster. We never asked for input of any kind, okay? So they're collecting input. They're storing it in a variable called HoHoHo, all right? Merry Christmas is going to be equal to enter the first letter again. So we now have collected two pieces of input. One of them we stored in HoHoHo. The other one we stored in Merry Christmas. And then we printed this, which basically printed whatever the person inputted, plus this string, plus Merry Christmas. Now, Merry Christmas was stuck to the very end of the O there, so kind of did not meet the requirements. Again, I have to ask the question because the person did do a great job in the flowchart, as I recall. Oh, wait a minute, no, they made mistakes on the flowchart. But as it was, the while loop in the flowchart did perform a while loop. Why didn't it show up in the Python? I have to ask the question. Okay, so let me come over here. Here's one where the person did some research and started importing files and stuff. I'm only bringing this particular one up because it wasn't necessary to do all this stuff. All right, so what exactly is this thing doing? Well, they're importing some Python code that is responsible for getting output. They're importing some Python code that is responsible for maybe taking its time, chewing up a little bit of time. And instead of using a while loop, they used a for loop, okay? And they wrote ho. They decided to clean out the input on the standard output, which wasn't really necessary, okay? Then they took a break for a little while, and then they printed, actually they ran through this again, so it's like ho, 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 and then Merry Christmas. Okay? So it did work. It just had a kind of a strange result as far as that goes. There's really no point in including all this extra stuff because Python all by itself has great input and output that's available for the introductory student. So let's have a look at some good code. All right, so we'll just go ahead and move this over here and make it look nice. Of course, you can't see all of the flowchart, which I've already showed you what it is, but let's look at this thing. So we have our assignment, the number, what it's all about, what the code does, and we're going to use a while loop, your name, etc. Okay, so here I have the code block area for input. Well, there isn't any required, so I made a comment for that. And then I have the code block area for processing. I set the loop control variable. I set my accumulator, which I'm just going to call string output, if you will, initialize the string out. And then I went ahead and I did my while loop. Now I could have used while is less than 2. That would have done the same thing, okay? So I have less than or equal to 3. Use a loop to create the HoHoHo. And I use this little convention in Python that allows me to do, to shorthand some of our coding, if you will, okay? So there's my ho. The 3 ho's happening. I'm updating my counter, so I'm working my way through the loop, and once the loop is completed, I go ahead and then concatenate Merry Christmas to the end of the HoHoHo, and then I finally print the output under the output section. It's a good idea to try to keep things in your mind separate: input, process, output. The reason that we do that is as programs become increasingly complex, you end up having to come up with new design approaches, and almost all of them, at the minimum, have input, processing, output. Some of them call it model, view, controller. That is, the view is what you see, the model is all of the processing, and the controller is the interfacing between the view and the model. Okay? So hopefully this was helpful to you.